Portal 2 is a game that has meant a lot to me over the years, as I'm sure you can tell by the videos on this channel, so when I realized that it was turning a decade old this year, I knew I had to make a video about it. Released on April 18th of 2011, Portal 2 managed to explode with comparable magnitude to that of the original. And through all that hype, the game managed to catch the eye of 12-year-old me, and after pestering my parents for almost 2 months, I finally convinced them to drive me down to a GameStop nearby to get a copy of it. The game ran horribly on my cheap 2011 laptop. I could barely move around, and the dialogue was totally out of sync for some reason. But even still, I was absolutely enthralled. It's hard to imagine Portal 2 as anything other than a perfect masterpiece for me, as almost everything has developed its own personal meaning in my eyes. However, as the years have gone on, I've come to recognize and understand some of its shortcomings. I'm going to try and be as objective and honest about those shortcomings in this video, even if they don't substantially affect my love of the game. So anyways, let's jump in.
The portal will open and emergency testing will begin in 3, 2, 1.
This is going to be the shortest section of the video, and that's primarily because there isn't a whole lot to say. Portal 2's gameplay is fine. In all honesty, I feel like it gets a lot of undeserved praise over the original, and while that might feel weird to say about a game that's beloved by so many, including myself, I would like to try and address some of the weaker aspects here before we get into the great stuff. Alright, let's back up a bit. Portal 1's test chambers had a really high emphasis on the use of the portal gun, and while Portal 2 doesn't totally deviate from this, the surrounding elements become much more of a focus here. And honestly, it's not a bad choice. It makes sense to hone in more on the secondary testing elements, as it allows for new and more inventive puzzles compared to Portal 1. It might not be as much of my thing when compared to the Portal 1 approach to level design, but it was a necessary change from the original game to keep things feeling new. One of the best attributes of Portal 2's level design is that all of the tests seem to be designed around making you do cool things. Fling yourself across a gap with gel, hop around the room on aerial faceplates, catch a cube in midair. Most of the core test concepts are really enjoyable and have a sense of cohesion and fun that the Portal 1 tests didn't. The issue is that Portal 2 also dialed down on the skill-based puzzles, a change which was likely made to make the game more accessible, and while Portal 1 certainly had some unfair challenges in its duration, Portal 2 runs a bit too far in the other direction, and it often feels like the gameplay is missing something because of it. It doesn't help that, as mentioned before, the puzzles are more centered around doing cool maneuvers. So when you do something which looks cool in concept, but realize the amount of control you have over it is effectively zero, it can feel a bit disappointing. The player direction can also get pretty wonky in the non-test areas, where on multiple occasions the entire puzzle just becomes search around the giant room for the 2 portalable surfaces you have to fling on where everything looks to be of equal importance. Breaking up the tests with these behind-the-scenes areas was important for keeping a good pace, but some of these easy puzzles end up feeling more taxing than the actual test chambers, which is definitely not a good thing. Regardless, there's still plenty of fun to be had here. Many of the tests are still genuinely brilliant in their design, and as we will get into very soon, the music helps to enhance the fun even further. I don't really have a whole lot more to say about the gameplay, so let's get into where Portal 2 really shines.
Hey, buddy, I'm speaking in an accent that is beyond her range of hearing.
Look, Metal Ball, I can hear you.
Run! I don't need to do the voice. Run! Run! Come on! Come on!
Just as with all of Valve's single-player titles, Portal 2 is a perfect example of how the way you tell a story is just as, if not even more important than what you tell, and fantastic game direction can be used to take a somewhat bland blueprint and make it into something spectacular. The most prominently amazing aspect of Portal 2's presentation is its use of music. In fact, I can confidently say that the music is the best part about this game, and without it, it would not have been nearly as effective. The game uses a dynamic music system, which allows for some very neat interactions between the player and the music. Jump on an aerial faceplate, the song will evolve to reflect that. Perform a fling properly, the game will reward you for it.
Can't help but notice that you're not coming back, which is disappointing.
As Valve composer Mike Moraski put it, the puzzles are thanking you for playing them. The soundtrack also has a very liberal usage of leitmotifs, such as the aforementioned Cara Mia Audio one. Another one of my favorites is the 999999 theme, one of the most prominent in the game. Usually, it comes up when the player is looking off into some large and imposing structures, but also plays when loading up the game for the first time, and at the very end. It's the glue that holds the entire experience together, and while there isn't quite anything as atmospheric or unnerving as some of the Portal 1 tracks, what does exist here works well for Portal 2's more upbeat tone and still sounds really great. But sound is only one half of what makes up the experience. The aesthetic of Portal 2 also deserves its due praise. Early tests for Portal 2 used the Portal 1 aesthetic as a base, and it very quickly led to some cursed results. As such, it was pretty clear early on that the designers were ready to go in a new direction, so Aperture got a bit of a facelift. Test chamber walls now more clearly contrasted with each other, making it more clear where you can and cannot place portals while improving the color palette. Monitors line the elevator rooms with world building. The personality spheres are far more complex. Just about everything here has been amped up when compared to the original game. And these changes were made mostly for the better. While I do love and appreciate Portal 1's more grounded and Half-Life 2-ish design style, I can't deny that the game just looks absolutely incredible at times, even 10 years later. The one change, albeit very minor, that I will take issue with is the crosshair. Portal 2's crosshair is awful compared to the original, as it barely tells you anything at all. In the original game, it would light up when you were looking towards a wall which you could place a portal on, as well as indicating the last portal that you fired. But here, it just seems to light up whenever there's an active portal in the map. And since you can't reset your portals, it effectively becomes useless the moment both of them are in the level. Hell, sometimes it doesn't even update when the portal is removed. I don't know if this was due to a lack of time, or if someone actually thought the crosshair was better than the original one, but honestly, it kinda sucks. Regardless, that's an incredibly small nitpick compared to all of the fantastic presentation in this game. So let's move on to the other area where Portal 2 shines brightest. The amount to which Portal 2's narrative evolved from that of Portal 1's cannot be overstated. Sure, it's undeniably bigger than Portal 1's, but more than that, it's almost completely different in terms of tone, with the only real connection between the two games being a general sense of humor. Whereas Portal's narrative was much more subtle, in the background of each test and only really delivered through dialogue or direct events in the last fourth of the game, Portal 2's narrative is much more overt, and forces interaction with it on a more direct level. You could go through much of Portal without paying attention at all to the lore, but you most certainly cannot do that in Portal 2. In this sense, Portal and Portal 2 mirror their sister games, Half-Life and Half-Life 2, whereas Half-Life opts to tell most of its story through environment, save for some key details at the beginning and end. Half-Life 2 takes an entirely different direction to narrative gameplay and is not opposed to locking you in a room for a couple of minutes to deliver exposition. Similarly, the narrative in Portal is far less overt when compared to Portal 2, and can pretty much be summarized with evil robot killed everyone and tries to kill you. What made this incredibly simple plot work for Portal was the way it was delivered. Hints at the larger picture were given throughout gameplay, but none ever distracted from the loop, and were presented with a remarkable amount of subtlety, at least for the earlier chambers. The reveal at the end, while certainly not unpredictable, comes as a surprise to the new player entirely because of this subtlety. To be clear, this is not to state that one form of narrative gameplay is inherently better or worse than another. I'd argue that this pattern almost proves how essential it is for a sequel's narrative devices to change and evolve between games. What Valve understands is that once the first game in a series cements the lore as something interesting to the player, the next installment ought to deliver more of that, and it's very difficult to deal with new ideas in the same setting without changing the type of narrative being told. So while I generally prefer the Portal and Half-Life 1 approach to storytelling, I don't think that Portal 2's narrative direction could have worked as anything other than what it is. Portal 2 feels like a necessary evolution of the Portal story. The facade is dropped, we know the true nature of Aperture Science, now it's time to have some fun. Portal 2 can be divided up into 3 major acts: the reconstructing tests ran by GLaDOS, the underground, and the finale. Each of these sections has its own distinct environments and challenges, which helps to keep the narrative momentum despite not much happening during large chunks of the game. In the first act, it's the facility reconstructing itself around you and your evolving relationship with GLaDOS, as well as Wheatley's plan to eventually escape. In the second act, it's learning the past of Aperture while ascending through the enrichment spheres to get back to the modern facility, and in the last act, it's the facility destructing around you while Wheatley tries to get his last fix of tests. Though admittedly, that last one isn't as interesting as the other two. This helps keep the pacing from feeling stagnant during the puzzle-focused sections which have little to no story development. The game also uses a large amount of foreshadowing to convey its story most effectively. The most obvious example is the Oracle Turret, an Easter egg which reveals cryptic information about coming events to players who choose to save it.
Prometheus was punished by the gods for giving the gift of knowledge to man. He was cast into the bowels of the earth and picked by birds.
Even more foreshadowing comes with the music, using motifs to connect or hint at future events. For instance, take this track which emanates from the light bridges in the first chamber with them. Now, listen to this track which emanates from the companion cube earlier on. You may notice that both are playing the same melody as the song that plays at the end of the game. And shortly after, the player is sent up to the surface alongside their companion cube, presumably from the first game. Companion cube plus sunlight equals ending. Oh my god! Even more, you can find the ending shed in the Lightbridge elevator briefing. These are incredibly subtle connections that most players won't notice or care about, but this kind of storytelling really serves to, at least on a subconscious level, enhance the emotion of the experience. So by the time you get to the end, it's just...
Holy moly.
Upon release, Portal 2 is praised by critics and fans alike, being on almost every Game of the Year list, becoming the highest rated game of all time on Steam, and spawning countless fan creations from gargantuan fan mods to DIY replicas to Minecraft recreations. How the fuck? While it certainly wasn't as well remembered by the general public as the first game, most nowadays view it as the quintessential title in the series. Think about that for a second. The game with so much iconography, cultural impact, and uniqueness is remembered less fondly than the sequel by the wider world. As for the game itself, it can't be understated how well it's aged. Most media, especially comedy from the early 2010s, is already showing its age pretty rapidly, yet Portal 2 manages to feel like something that could have come out today. Unfortunately, Portal 2's impact on Valve wasn't as pleasant. The development of the game meant that work had halted on a potential Episode 3, and by the time Portal 2 was finished, Valve already wanted to go in a totally different direction. Just as Portal 2 strayed further from Half-Life compared to its predecessor, so did Valve, going radio silent on any future plans, and using the Portal IP as nothing more than a marketing tool for hardware and Steam updates. The fan community kept the series alive though, with mods such as Portal Stories Mel, And even still, up-and-coming projects are being worked on today, such as Portal 2 Community Edition, Valhalla, Desolation, Portal Reloaded, and many, many more. One day, Valve may choose to return to the series, but for now, it lays dormant, its only arguable continuation being in the form of Half-Life Alyx. Portal 2 is very likely to go down in history as one of the greatest games ever made. Though the ways it built upon the original were very incremental, the final product was polished to a mirror shine that you rarely ever see in AAA game releases. Though the series is unlikely to have a future outside of marketing, its spirit lives on in the modern continuation of the Half-Life series, and in the rich and promising modding communities still active today. While Portal 2 might not have been as impactful in the gaming industry as its predecessor, Portal 2 has undeniably made its presence known to the wider world, and is a game that many, myself included, will continue to play for years to come.